Hi, I'm Ruth George, and this is the Good Life and Legacy podcast, where we explore answers to the question, how are you creating a great legacy by living well, planning well, and supporting those that you care about? And today's extremely special guest is Sharon Preston-Folta. Sharon has found her voice and has decided to tell the story of her life and who she is. It's been 50 years in the making. The secret is no longer a secret. Sharon is the daughter of the Louis Armstrong, and a book and documentary about Little Satchmo are bringing to life her life. I read the book and watched the documentary and just felt so much for Sharon. Welcome to the podcast, Sharon.
Thank you, Ruth. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. So, Sharon, can you give us the background as to how your mother and father, Louis Armstrong, met?
Yes, my mother was a performer in Black vaudeville, and she and her husband, Luther Preston, were a dance team called Slim and Sweets. And my mother started dancing when she was 16. She met Slim a couple of years later. They formed a team and they got married. And all throughout the 1940s, they had a stellar career. What they did was they were the opening or the middle act of these traveling shows. And back then the shows would have, multiple acts, always having a headliner. And my father would be one of those headliners, Louis Armstrong. Count Basie could have been one, Billie Holiday. And so Mom and her husband, Slim, were on the bill and traveled with Louis, and they were all very friendly. And as all of the crew, because especially back in the 1940s, Black performers needed to travel together, often lived in people's homes, especially in the South because of Jim Crow, and they ate together, so they became family. Mm-hmm. And my mother's husband died in 1950. And when Slim died, my father came to pay his respects after the funeral. And when he left, he just said to my mother, "I'm supposed to take care of you." And she said, "Okay." And that started their relationship, which was a friendship. And it turned into a romantic relationship.
Yes, I've seen Slim and Sweets on YouTube. I think it's incredible that we can see them dancing right there. So It's just fabulous and such energy. It brings a smile to my face. So I've enjoyed the videos. In a letter your father wrote, Sharon may not realize how I am doing for her, but I am sure she will appreciate me as she grows. What do you think your father thought his legacy to you was, and what were you supposed to appreciate?
He felt that his legacy to me was making sure that I had all of my basic needs taken care of. And he was very proud of the fact that he provided food and shelter and opportunity for entertainment and extracurricular activities. And for him, that's really, he did leave the legacy he wanted. Right. The emotional attachment or the day by day learning and growing and nurturing was not something that he did, and maybe did not intend to do. As I say in the movie, he was brought up in a single parent home pretty much and raised by a grandparent. So his knowledge of, fatherhood came from how his father treated him, and his father was an absentee father. But my father's legacy, he was very proud that he was supporting us. And he wrote in various letters, you have what you need. I'm supporting, giving you these things. And I don't see these in other places, or people shirk their responsibilities. So I know he was proud of that. And he was also saving for my college.
Yeah. One of the things I noted from your book was that your father's legacy was putting other people at ease. So it is sort of ironic, sad, if you will, that somehow he couldn't do the same for you with your legacy as far as who you were in his life.
Yeah.
but I know you're coming to terms with all of these things now. What does your idea of what a legacy is differ from your father's, and what helped you to see it in those terms?
You know, I think one of the biggest ways that I've been able to see legacy differently from my parents really has to do with the education that I've received, and also exposure to other cultures and other families, to get a sense of generational um, histories, and how these things are handed down. That was a concept that did not come from my family in any way, relatives or not, um, relatives or parents, I mean, but from being out in the world, and from classmates, and from, and just learning how families can take care of, and in many ways it's expected. So as I started to think about my own legacy, as I was a grandmother in my 50s, I wanted to think about not only, any kind of generation wealth that I could pass on, but knowledge and history. And it was in that thought, the legacy that I did not want to pass on was just whispering who my father was. It just wasn't something I wanted my grandchildren and great grandchildren to not be able to speak about freely.
Right, carrying on a secret and feeling ashamed
Right.
of who you are, and keeping that secret is just a very, I can't imagine such a difficult thing to deal with. And certainly you've been coming to terms with that. So I applaud you for all of your efforts. And that is true, how you're saying you had to broaden your horizons by seeing how other families dealt with legacies and passing along information and knowledge about who they are. And it's more than just maybe financially taking care of somebody. So that's incredible. So you're talking about resolving your father's legacy by coming forward with the truth. And so would you say that you're course correcting the legacy a little bit with what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. I'm taking it out of the darkness, and the shame that went along with it has dissipated, because
Right,
it just was. It's the
right,
facts, and acceptance really is the key to healing in that area.
right. Right. In your book and the documentary, you talk about how your father provided for you financially while he was alive, but that you did need so much more than that. You needed more than the occasional teachable moment and a check and a house. You needed a father. So, aside from finances, what do you think should be included in planning well?
I think memorabilia, certain items, I was able to, the items that I have from him are written, his communication, which I'm very grateful, that I had that. And, that my mother had that as well. But I think physical items,
Mhm.
handed down is a good way to pass on the family history. So I would have, liked memorabilia in that way. He did send me a book, and he wrote in the book, and I somewhere in my moves, I lost that. And that's one of my biggest regrets, because it was such a personal letter that he wrote to me, and
Mm,
how he felt that the young lady in the book reminded him of me, and just which had me know that he thought of me, as not heroic, but someone making a difference. So I mean, that was important to me. And as I said, I lost that. But I think families passing down certain items that have significance, that that is a good that is a good way. That should always be included.
right, right. This idea that he, for whatever reason, had all these reel to reel tapes and letters that are these communications to you, that I think even in your book, you said you didn't really realize how incredible they were, but that he did these recordings again and the letters to you, and you've had them, and do you still have a lot of them as far as those items that he had done throughout the years, the recordings and the letters?
I donated them to the Library of Congress.
So you donated pretty much
Yeah,
all of them?
yeah,
That's what I
I
wasn't
did.
sure of.
I
Okay.
thought that was the best place for his communication to it, because there's other items in there from him to his manager, to Leonard Bernstein, to other people. There's a lot of his, stuff in the Library of Congress,
Mhm.
including a letter that he wrote to his manager, Joe Glazier, that talks about how he became a father.
Yes,
And, I was so thrilled when they said that they would accept
right,
my collection.
right,
So I think that kind of communication, that's the rightful place, because that belongs to the world.
right.
Him speaking and letting people know who he was. But a personal item, I guess for my father could have been a trumpet, could have been, any of his handkerchiefs,
Oh,
his favorite book, just something that is just really personal.
right. Oh, well, you talk about the bitter pill of every missed moment. How has it helped you to start to tell the truth? And do you look at the changes you brought about and feel confident that you made the right decision in coming forward the way that you did?
Absolutely, because what I have found is that all those missed moments, I'm getting them in different ways from the people that he touched.
Mhm.
And when I have gone out, whether it's screening the documentary or the book, people have come up to me and they tell me how my father has touched his life.
Right.
So I'm getting the missed moments of sharing in his brilliance, his celebrity, his public life, because the public is letting me know what he meant to them, what their favorite song was. Older musicians sharing that, they looked up to him or they played with him. They were children,
Right.
but how they met him. People who were in the service, my
Mhm.
father came to entertain, and
Yeah.
sharing that experience. I even met a couple that was at the same one of the same concerts that I was, which was one of my most memorable experiences with him. And so I shared that. So I'm
Oh,
getting it in a much different way, and it's giving me so much of a wider view of him
right.
and a deeper understanding of how people loved him, you know.
Right. Right. They can envelop you with all of the feelings they had for his legacy as far as the music world and his genius there and
Mhm.
everything that he brought about and all the creativity, so you can kind of feel that goodness coming in. So that's wonderful that you can feel that now,
Yeah,
share that now. That's really neat.
yeah, that's a
uh,
gift.
yeah. So your father died when you were age 16 and shortly after you had your own child. What do you make of that difficult time and how did you move through that?
By the grace of God is how I moved through it, really. And we had a good support system with I was active in school, and even though I was in a all girls Catholic high school, I did not miss any school. Believe it or not, I lost weight as I gained in pregnancy, and was not carrying very wide. I carried in a way where I actually concealed it, and went to school. And of course, the nuns did know, but they did not make me go to a different class or a school, because they wouldn't have a class for, there are schools for pregnant teens. but I was supported in school. We have dear friends that helped me, relatives helped me, so there were people around to help me through it. And I was just really focused on taking care of my son and my mother.
Mhm.
And my mother was there, and she was more the mother, acting as the maternal mother. I was acting as the breadwinner at that age.
Wow.
So that was the survival, really, because by the time I graduated high school, any monies that my father had left were gone. My mother needed to work, and I could work, so I did.
Right.
And I was working at McDonald's and became a manager, and I was going to school. So,
Wow.
I was doing a lot, and a lot of the parenting went to my mother.
Wow.
So just really just going through it. And I thankfully I graduated from college and got a great internship, which led to a job at WHN in New York. And that helped me tremendously, and which led to my career in sales for over 30 years.
Mhm.
So it all worked out. It was once I, got to a place in my career and life that I just started to settle down to look at other things. But I was just hyper focused on, making sure that we all made it financially.
Wow, that's really amazing because I can't imagine the grief that you and your mother were going through reading the book and thinking about how you couldn't attend the public service. You're finding out on TV that he passed and just being in a kind of state of shock and grief. And then, of
We
course,
stayed in that
financially.
state of shock for years, and
Yeah.
we just kind of just held on to the grief for years. I don't know if my mother ever fully grieved my
Mhm.
father. I didn't grieve him until I started the process of writing the book,
Oh,
because
good.
that was the first time I actually read his obituary. And we're
Wow.
talking 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and he's passed 50 years. And it's just then that I was able to sit down
Right.
and read his obituary and be in that moment, you know.
Right.
So he passed. We hardly talked about it. I just kind of, it was just something in there. It was just never really resolved
Mhm.
until at maybe 12 years ago.
Did the shock turn to anger?
More sadness.
Mhm.
I would say in my 20s, the anger was, just pushing away, who I was and not even connecting with
Right.
that because of, you know, 2 years not seeing him and the lead up. And just like, I had made up my mind that I needed to be self-sufficient, but
Mhm.
then it was just the sadness
Right.
that
Mm.
came in and dominated.
Yeah. Well, as a parent and as a woman leaving her own legacy, how do you think parents can do better in terms of being culpable, which is a word that you stated adults were culpable in your situation because your father was protected, really, and that's what your mother wanted to do to protect your father. So, how do you think that you can go about being a better parent and thinking of the children? And does that change once the child becomes an adult?
When you're thinking of the children, just put yourself in their shoes and figure out what it is that you would need,
Right,
and I mean, there are children who are from blended families, and looking at, well, this is mine, so I'm going to do, just look at, what the children would need to move forward, and then make your plans in that way. um
right,
a lot of people make plans on what they feel they want, to do based on what, people will need, just, looking ahead, looking at the future, not, you know at their moment. It's not about them. It's about, if you're leaving a legacy, that means you're leaving. So why, don't look at it, how you're going to be satisfied with something. I feel, it's look at the children. I know emotions come into it, but fairness, plays a role. And I think that's how they could be more responsible.
Right. Thinking of what the child needs.
Yeah.
Right.
Just put yourself in their shoes.
Right.
And look at what you have. What would you, if that were you, what would you need? And what would you want to see?
Right. And your father had ill health, and I understand the last few years, maybe doctors were telling him to do X, Y, or Z, but he really wasn't so good at following doctor's orders. Certainly there was something there to be concerned about with health issues, right? And him not wanting to follow the doctor's orders and just continuing to play the music as far as what he felt like he wanted to do. So it's hard to kind of take what people are telling you and do what might be helpful for yourself and then in turn helpful for others. So what do you think about him in the last few years there where he was really kind of going against what the doctors were telling him?
Well, I look at it, and his whole life and his love, was the horn and the music. And everything else was as a result of what he could do with the horn and the music and the traveling. That was the world that he knew.
Right.
So, he had, so following his heart,
Right.
That's what he needed to do.
Right. It would almost been too much to ask. I'm thinking when you're saying do what, would be in the best interest of the child, really, I'm thinking when you're given some information that your health is failing in some respect, maybe at that point he could have had the moment where he said, I want to reach out and do something helpful to my child and have some communication that'll help her or reach out to her or something, especially in those last few years. So just I think what you said, that his whole world was the trumpet, and that was, as you have said, his real love, in life, as far as what he just wanted to do.
And his focus. So, and it was never the nurturing. So the reaching out, would be something that I would think of and definitely wanted. But for him, financially, we were connected, and he was still in his mind doing what he said he was going to do.
Right.
And that made him proud that he could do that.
Right. I think what I still struggle with, if you will, when I look at your book, is that he expressed such desire for you as a child and called you, give my daughter a kiss, and, always was speaking of you with such, wonderful terms and adored you. And just, it's sort of hard to reconcile then with, the other aspects of it where he was keeping that all secret.
It is. Can't explain it, just know that it that's what it was. And I can't, know the full turmoil in his heart.
Sure.
I've asked those same questions.
Right.
And I won't know those answers. I just know what he did. And again, as sick as he was, the life and love was his music. Right. So, that's where his energy went.
Right. Well, again, a lot of your early life was lived in secret with a lot of focus put on keeping your father happy and protected. So what does living well mean for you today?
Living in balance, not having one part of your life, take over the other. So, being, focusing and having a life that supports you physically, emotionally, not being stressed out or pulled in ways that just don't make you feel well.
Right.
And then materially, so that's what living well, living life in balance and having people in your life that support you, which,
Right.
communities that support you. And, if you're giving back and you're volunteering, or if you're in a job, make sure it's something that is good for you. That's what I've learned, to not suffer, like work and just be suffering.
Right.
Finally got to a place, if this is not working, there's someplace else that will, feeling confident enough and feeling worthy enough that, I deserve to have good health, good
Right.
material success and physical well-being. So, that's
Right.
what living well, being
Right.
in balance.
Right. And from your book again, to love and be loved.
Yeah.
I think you talked about Slim and Sweets who were in love with each other, and I think that was a quote I remember from that part of the book.
Yeah, they
What
were
have you?
loved and in loved.
Yeah. What have you committed to in bringing more joy into your life?
Well, what I do is, meditation helps bring a lot of joy in my life. And I'm very active in my community. So volunteering um, is another thing. Again, I'm still working full time and making sure that, I check in, am I really enjoying this, especially in the
Oh,
stressful times?
yeah.
And I am.
Oh,
So, but my volunteering and just the support that I have with friends and family,
yeah.
that brings joy.
That's wonderful. Are you intending, or are you working on a sequel to Little Satchmo?
I'm not
Oh,
at
okay.
this time. I've been asked, so there could be, but I'm not working on one at this time. And I've also been approached about making the documentary into a feature film.
Wow.
People have thrown that idea out, but nothing is concrete. So, you know, uh, there are possibilities out there to extend the story.
Yes, the story could be talked about in so many different ways and give insight to so many different people going through different things, as far
Yeah,
as family, legacy, keeping secrets, loving one another, being happy, being supportive. So there's so many good lessons in everything that you're speaking about. So is there anything else that you'd like to just say, or let people know about? Of course, I would tell people to read the book and view the documentary when they have the opportunity to do so.
well, thank you for this opportunity. And also, Little Satchmo is the season opener for Real South on PBS. And we opened the season, and Real South is a collection of PBS stations from North and South Carolina, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas. So it's broadcast in those markets now, it's being broadcast, but it is online at pbs.org. So if you'd like to see the documentary, it is available now through July, and it will be on other PBS stations. And we're really proud to be a part of the PBS family. I myself work for public media, NPR, and so it feels like I'm in my home base.
Yes.
And I just, again, just be mindful of what that generation will need, the next generation, or what you want, what you are available to leave to them, that
Right.
that they would need to for their survival.
Oh, that is so wonderful. Right. I have caught the documentary a couple of times and I will keep looking out for it. It is so wonderful. I just loved it. And the book I could read over and over again. So just incredible. I loved everything.
Thank
Well,
you so
thank you
much.
so much for being a part of this podcast. And I'll be looking out for everything that you do, and all the best to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your support.